How amphibians use continuous respiration, which means skin breathing. Amphibians have thin and moist skin that allows oxygen to diffuse into the body while carbon dioxide diffuse out. This gas exchange happens through the capillaries just beneath the skin. During cold season, like fall and winter, amphibians rely more on the skin breathing instead of using their lungs. When a frog is floating in water, it can use both methods at the same time. The head stays above water for the lung breathing, while the rest of the body remains underwater for skin breathing. This shows how amphibians are adapted to survive both on land and the water.
Now I will explain pulmonary respiration, which is respiration using the lung in frogs. Frog doesn't have a diaphragm like humans. Instead, they use throat muscle to move air. Air enters through the nostril into the mouth cavity. Then, the frog closes its nostril and uses its throat muscle to push air from the mouth into the lungs. Inside the lungs, gas exchange occurs, where oxygen enters the blood and carbon dioxide leaves the blood. Frogs use both pulmonary and continuous respirations to survive in different environments. The lungs are mainly used on land, while the skins play a role when they are in water or in low oxygen conditions.
Frogs are classified as amphibians, meaning they are able to inhabit both aquatic and terrestrial environments. One distinct characteristic that often attracts attention is their consistently moist skin. This feature is not incidental, it serves a critical physiological function. For respiratory gases such as oxygen and carbon dioxide to move across biological membranes, they must first be dissolved in a thin layer of water. Because of this requirement, the moisture on a frog's skin becomes an essential component of its respiratory system. While submerged, frogs rely heavily on cutaneous respiration, a process in which gas exchange occurs directly through the skin. Oxygen present in the surrounding water dissolves on the skin surface and diffuses into the underlying blood vessels. While carbon dioxide simultaneously diffuses out, this mechanism is highly efficient as long as the skin remains adequately hydrated. Even on land, frogs must ensure that their skin does not dry out. They typically remain in damp or shaded habitats to maintain this moisture layer, allowing them to continue absorbing oxygen when lung ventilation alone is insufficient. However, when the skin loses moisture, gas diffusion becomes severely limited. A dry surface prevents oxygen from dissolving and entering the bloodstream, ultimately compromising the frog's ability to breathe. In essence, the persistent moisture on a frog's skin is not merely a physical trait but a vital adaptation that enables effective respiration and support its survival in diverse environments.
I bet you guys must be wondering, how does temperature and water availability affect amphibians' respirations? Let me explain it clearly. Amphibians, we know as frogs, use both lungs and thus moist skin to breathe. Their respiration depends heavily on environmental factors. So, in a moderate temperature, or we know as a moist environment, frog breathes easily through both skins and their lungs. So next, in cold weather, frogs' metabolism will slow. Frog need less oxygen and breathes mainly through skin. So, what about in the high temperatures? So, in the high temperature environments, frog will increase their metabolisms, so at the same time, the oxygen will demand rises. Their skin may dry out, making continuous respiration difficult and causing stress or suffocations. And also, without a moisture environment, frog skin will dry and the oxygen diffusion drops sharply. And lastly, frog adapt by burrowing staying moist, relying more on lungs to survive extreme conditions.
Now I'm going to explain about the limitations of cutaneous respiration in larger amphibians. One major limitation is the low surface area to volume ratio in larger amphibians. As an animal grows bigger, its volume increases faster than its surface area. This means there is relatively less skin available for gas exchange, even though the body's oxygen demand is much higher. As a result, cutaneous respiration alone cannot supply enough oxygen for large amphibians. Another important limitation is the need for moisture. Cutaneous respiration only works efficiently when the skin is moist because oxygen must dissolve in water before it can diffuse into the blood. In larger amphibians, it is much harder to keep the entire body surface moist, especially in dry or terrestrial environments. This increases the risk of dehydration and reduces the effectiveness of gas exchange. The third limitation is thick skin. Larger amphibians tend to have thicker, more protective skin. While this helps reduces water loss and protects the body, it also increases the distance that oxygen and carbon dioxide must diffuse. This leads to slower diffusion rates, making cutaneous respiration less efficient. Furthermore, another limitation of cutaneous respiration in larger amphibians is the low diffusion rate. Oxygen and carbon dioxide move across the skin by diffusion, which is a slow process. In large amphibians, this rate of diffusion is often not sufficient to meet the demands of a high metabolic rate, especially during activities such as movement, feeding, or escaping predators. Last but not least, cutaneous respiration shows a strong environmental dependence. It only works efficiently in moist, oxygen-rich habitats because the skin must remain wet for gas exchange to occur. Larger amphibians are more restricted to these environments, as dry conditions or low oxygen levels greatly reduce the effectiveness of cutaneous respiration.
Last but not least, how environmental changes affect amphibian respiration. To begin with, let us observe a frog at a pond. When the frog is in water, it mainly uses its skin to breathe. In contrast, when it is on land, the frog relies more on its lungs for respiration. This adaptation allows frogs to survive in both aquatic and terrestrial habitats. Specifically, when frogs are underwater, they breathe through a process known as cutaneous respiration. Oxygen dissolved in the water diffuses directly through their thin, moist skin into the bloodstream. As a result, this method is very efficient, but it only works if the skin remains healthy and moist. On the other hand, when frogs are on land, they breathe mainly through their lungs. Nevertheless, their skin still plays an important role and must remain moist to allow some gas exchange. If this condition is not met, breathing becomes less effective and the frog may experience stress. Unfortunately, habitat pollution can seriously affect frog respiration. Pollutants can damage the frog's skin and block oxygen from entering the body. Consequently, breathing underwater becomes more difficult, causing the frog to have less energy and reduced movement. Furthermore, habitat loss and drought create serious challenges for frogs. When water sources dry up, cutaneous respiration fails. As a consequence, the frog's skin becomes dry, oxygen diffusion drops sharply, and breathing becomes much more difficult, threatening the frog's survival. Finally, temperature changes also affect how frogs breathe. When the temperature is high, there is less oxygen dissolved in the water. Therefore, frogs depend more on their lungs. In contrast, when the temperature is low, frogs rely more on breathing through their skin.